Hey guys, my name is Iasmina and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do a wrap-up, so wrapping up the last 5 or so books that I've read and that I want to talk about to you guys. I have a nice stack here of all kinds of genres actually, like fantasy, graphic novels, contemporary, thriller, mystery / crime, and that's actually a pretty good representation of kind of my usual reading routine. I definitely try to alternate between genres in any given sort of reading period, so that way I know I'll never get bored of one particular genre, and I do have so many different genres to read on my shelf. So I have 6 books to get through, so let's just jump right in and tell you about all these books that I've read recently. Okay, so the first book of the stack that I read, I'll try to go chronologically from last that I've read to the most recent one. And the first one is a contemporary novel, and that is The Inexplicable Logic of My Life by Benjamin Elia Saenz. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce his name. It's interesting because I adored his other book, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, which I'm too lazy to pick up and show you right now, but I'm sure all of you know what it looks like because it's a very famous book, or at least it's very popular on BookTube. I loved that one, and so obviously I expected to love this just as much, and honestly by that title and the tone that is conveyed in the title, I guess I expected something a little different. I expected something maybe funnier than what it was. What it was great. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. One more thing I should mention, I'm going to tell you like what I rated these books, and obviously I rate them on Goodreads, and Goodreads has this 5-star rating system, which is not perfect because sometimes something is, you know, 4.2, 4.5. It's not perfectly 5 stars, but you don't want to necessarily give it 4 stars either, so it's a little, you know. But in Goodreads terms, I did rate this 4 out of 5 stars, so it wasn't my absolute favorite, but I did really enjoy it. It has really fantastic friendships and family dynamics in it. I really loved reading about the main character's family and his best friend, and there's a lot of diversity in this book. The author's writing style is very interesting, and I guess maybe I didn't notice it as much in Aristotle and Dante, but I definitely noticed it in here. The dialogue between characters is very sort of fast. There's not a lot of internal thought. It might take a little bit to get used to, is what I'm saying, but I did really enjoy this book, so I would recommend it. Now, one thing I do want to mention is that I've heard on the Twitterverse that this author might do some things that I don't agree with, and that most people in the book world don't agree with. And I'm not entirely sure if it's 100% true. I have not seen proof, but there have been people who've said that the author attacks people who leave him negative reviews, and he goes out of his way in order to reply to them and tell them how they're wrong, and I don't agree with that at all. I'm just putting it out there in case that's something that bothers you and that might deter you from reading this book. I didn't know that before reading both of his books. I've only just recently seen that, and I definitely don't approve of it, but I'm not entirely sure if it's true, so I can't really say, okay, I don't recommend you reading his books, because, well, just in general, authors shouldn't do that. Once you put your book out there, it's up to readers to, well, basically judge it, and some people will like it, some people will not. That's the universal truth, is that you can't please everyone. And to summarize, I did enjoy this book. I think it has a lot of merit to it, and so I would recommend it if you're in for an interesting, diverse contemporary story. The next book I want to talk about is the one that took me the longest to read. It's also because it's very long, but I also really enjoyed it, so I kind of actually wanted to take it slow and take my time with it. And that is the fantasy novel Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan. So this is the first book in the Raven's Shadow trilogy, and I had purchased this a long time ago, and I only just got around to reading it, and I don't know what took me so long because I love this so much. So I've heard a lot of people praise this book, and I now know why. It was amazing. I mean, this is epic epic fantasy. I will say it's kind of low magic epic fantasy, so don't expect really epic sort of magic battles between wizards. It's more on the lines of Game of Thrones magic system. So I've heard people compare this to The Name of the Wind, and I disagree. I don't think it's anything like Name of the Wind, except for the fact that the main character kind of tells his story to a kind of chronicler. It's not exactly that, but I won't spoil it. Also, we do follow the main character from when he was relatively young, and he grows up throughout the book. Those are the two similarities between this and Name of the Wind that I can see. I would compare it to, like I've said, Game of Thrones. For example, if Game of Thrones was written from the sole perspective of Jon Snow in the kind of first to second book in the Song of Ice and Fire, that's kind of the vibe that this gave me. The world, the setting is very much medieval Europe. Like I said, the magic system is really interesting. I'm still kind of confused about the magic system. It's not completely explained by the end, and so I was left a little bit confused, but it's definitely kind of on the low magic side. My absolute favorite thing about this book was that it was non-stop action. There was not a dull moment, a dull scene in this book, and that kind of really struck me. Again, without going into too many spoilers, the first part of this book kind of follows the main character as he goes through a kind of training process, and you know, throughout this training he had different tests to face, and we started out with the first one, and it was really intense, and it had like, I don't know, 50 to maybe 100 pages, I don't know, I can't remember, but it was really intense. And so, you know, as a writer, as someone who kind of knows how to pace things, or at least thinks knows how to pace things, I would have expected kind of like a quieter moment, a quieter chapter afterwards. No, we just go straight back into another intense chapter and test, and it just goes on and on. This is 700 and something pages long, this edition, and yeah, it was intense. It was an intense 700 pages. So let me tell you a bit more about it. So the main character is called Valen. I think that's how you pronounce it, I'm not entirely sure. And we follow him from the age around 8, if I remember correctly. He is left at this, it's called the Fourth Order. And think of it, I like to think of it as the wall from Game of Thrones where Jon Snow goes to take the Black. Kind of more or less what it is. It's sort of this order where kids go to learn how to fight and how to protect the realm against the bad guys. Also, even though this book is the first in a trilogy, I honestly think it wrapped up pretty damn well. I would even recommend you reading this just on its own. I don't feel like you have to read the sequels, and I've actually heard some people say that the sequels are not as good. If any of you guys have read this series, do let me know what you thought about the second and third book. I will most definitely pick up at least the second one and see how the story progresses, but it does actually stand pretty well on its own. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. It's one of my new favorite fantasy novels. I would highly recommend you read Bloodsong if you like epic fantasy. The next book I want to talk about is something that I picked up because I had just finished Bloodsong after, I don't know, it took me I think 2 or 3 weeks, maybe actually more, to finish that book. That sometimes I'm really slow at reading, sometimes I'm really fast, but like I said, I did really enjoy that, but I wanted something quick, and I actually wanted a few somethings that are much quicker to read after that, and so I decided to pick up a graphic novel, and that is Paper Girls Volume 1 by Brian K. Vaughan and Cliff Chang. So Brian K. Vaughan, as some of you may know, wrote Saga, the Saga graphic novel or comic books series, which I read the first 3 of and really enjoyed. I need to continue with that series, but this appealed to me actually so much more than Saga because, well, first of all, the color scheme is amazing, and it's just as amazing inside as well, but also because it follows a group of girls on a paper route in the 80s, and creepy things start happening. So a lot of Stranger Things vibes in this, and definitely the reason I picked it up, and it did not disappoint in that matter. It was definitely reminiscent of Stranger Things. Stranger Things is my favorite TV show ever. I will pick up anything that kind of reminds me of that, and this did, and it definitely delivered on that. So like I said, it does follow a group of 4 girls who are going on a paper route. One of them is new to this job, and she meets the other 3 who are kind of veterans, and they have their own little zones that they control, delivering papers at 4 in the morning. And this new girl, she joins the other 3, and then they discover some weird stuff that is happening in their small town, and they start investigating that, and then weird things happen. Really good. I would highly recommend the series if you like Stranger Things, or if you like that kind of creepy 80s small town America kind of vibe. Really good. Also, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I picked up after that was a nonfiction, and that is The Good Immigrant. This is edited by Nikesh Shukla, but it's actually a collection of essays by 21 writers who are mostly second-generation immigrants in Britain. And all of these essays pretty much explore what it's like to grow up in an immigrant family in Britain today. Or, well, in the 90s/2000s, basically. This was really good. It opened my eyes a lot, because all of these authors, they come from all sorts of backgrounds, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, and every single one told their own story in their obviously specific style, and some were funny, some were heartwarming, some were very much factual. But I learned so much from this book about all these different cultures and all of the difficulties that every culture faces once they move out of that country, out of that culture, and into a different culture that may not be as welcoming as they'd like to think that they are. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars only because some of the essays were very factual. They were basically, you know, a collection of references from different publications about statistics and stuff, and I didn't enjoy those as much as I enjoyed some of the more personal, kind of honest stories told by these authors. My favorite, I think, was Nish Kumar's story, which I think I've heard about before, but he accidentally became a meme for the wrong reasons. So that's all I'll say about that, but his story was really funny. And my second favorite was Kieran Yates's story about going home, it's actually called. So Nish Kumar's story is called Is Nish Kumar a Confused Muslim? And Kieran Yates's story is called On Going Home. So, yes. Next book I picked up, I did so because I wanted something a bit more appropriate, I guess, for the fall, something maybe a little spooky or creepy, and who else but Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie just seemed like the perfect candidate, so I read And Then There Were None by the one and only Queen of Crime. Now, this was my first Agatha Christie book, and I read it in a day and a bit, and I need more Agatha Christie in my life. I actually loved it so much that I now am in the very early process of outlining my own thriller mystery novel. Yeah. So this was great. I'm sure most of you know the story already, but for those who maybe don't, this is about 8 people in the 1930s who get letters summoning them to have a vacation on this mansion on an isolated island somewhere around the coast of England, I think. All of these people are summoned by this Mr. and Mrs. Owen, who they all think they know or have some kind of connection to, or maybe they were summoned there for services or things like that. When they all get there, Mr. and Mrs. Owen are nowhere to be found, and instead they are greeted by the butler and his wife, who take care of the house and who welcome them and everything. So there are 10 people in this house, and then the first night there, one of them dies by mysterious circumstances. And on the wall above their bedrooms, in each of their separate bedrooms, there is a nursery rhyme written that is called And Then There Were None. And this nursery rhyme pretty much describes how 10 people all die of a different cause. And in the dining room, in the middle of the dining room, there is a plate with 10 glass soldiers. And as each of them start to die in very similar ways to the nursery rhyme, the glass soldiers on the table begin to disappear one by one. Yeah, this was this was awesome. The one thing I will say though is that in the beginning the writing felt a bit jarring because it's kind of told from this omniscient narrative point of view, and obviously there's 10 characters, and some of the sentences in the beginning, because there were so many characters, were a little bit jarring. I'll try and find some to kind of show you what I mean. So I found a paragraph as an example to tell you what I mean. So it goes something like this. Mr. Justice Wargrave, mellowed by the excellent port, was being amusing in a caustic fashion. Dr. Armstrong and Tony Marston were listening to him. Miss Brent chatted to General MacArthur. They had discovered some mutual friends. Vera Claymore was asking Mr. Davis intelligent questions about South Africa. Mr. Davis was quite fluent on the subject. Lombard listened to the conversation. So this is kind of what I mean. The writing kind of goes sentence by sentence to what each of the characters are doing, and it's very dun, 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 you know, this character is doing this character is doing this character is doing this, and I'm not a fan of that sort of writing style. It gets very jarring after some time of a lot of that. But to be fair, it was only in a few places in the beginning, and as I said, there were less and less characters to talk about, it became a lot better. The writing became a lot better. So enough rambling. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I am so excited to pick up more Agatha Christie. I think it's a perfect sort of fall, you know, October creepy kind of read, and I would highly recommend it. So if you've read more of Agatha Christie's work, do let me know which ones are your favorites and which I should pick up next, because I will definitely do so. And the last book I want to mention is a reread, obviously, as you'll see. And I just want to mention it quickly, but I reread the Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban illustrated, gorgeous illustrated edition by Jim Kay. Look at this beast. If you're not aware of these editions, oh boy, these are amazing. Let me just try and find one to awe you with. So, as an example, look at this. This is Harry, Ron, and Hermione in the magical menagerie creature shop in Diagon Alley, and it's just gorgeous. I adore these editions. The first 3 books are out, and if you didn't know, they release each one once a year, so for 3 years I have been receiving each one for Christmas. Unfortunately, the 4th one was supposed to come out this year, but it's been postponed until next year. Sadly, I won't be getting it for Christmas this year, but I'm so curious and honestly terrified what they're gonna do with the other ones, because like, this is a weapon. It is hefty, and this is the last short book in the series, and they jump by quite a lot from Goblet of Fire, so I am very curious what they're going to do with it. But obviously I don't need to say I rated this 5 out of 5 stars. I adore Harry Potter, and I always will, so but I just wanted to mention that I did reread this, and also a really nice one to read for fall, winter time. Harry Potter, for some reason, is always really nice around that time. But yeah, those were the last 6 books I read, and I hope you enjoyed me rambling about these books, and I hope maybe some of them have piqued your interest. If so, I will leave links to all of these books down below, as I do all the time through Book Depository. Do let me know what have you been reading and loving or not loving recently. I'm curious to know. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next Monday with a new video. Bye!